Hello everyone and welcome to another really wonderful game between Magnus Carlsen and Nepomniachtchi. We are continuing our preparations for the World Chess Championship match, and again a game from 2011 Tal Memorial that was played in Moscow between the challenger and champion. So it was an incredibly strong tournament. It featured not one, not two, not three, but actually four players that were rated over 2800 at the time. It was Magnus, Vichy, Kramnik and Arunyan. Altogether it was an incredibly strong tournament. So this is one of the games. All the games are of the classical type format, except for the one that I've read in 2014. For some reason, they did not play a classical. They played a blitz tournament. But other than that, the Tal Memorial tournaments are always in classical time format. So Magnus has the white pieces, and he opens with e4. Let's check it out. We have c5, and this is almost 10 years, or rather, the World Chess Championship match will be like a 10-year anniversary to this game. I think it was even played on 23rd of November. So here, knight to f3, d6, and Magnus goes for the Canal attack with bishop to b5 check. We have bishop to d7, and bishop captures on d7 with check. Queen captures, and now c4. So it makes sense. Your opponent still did not play knight to f6. Your e4 pawn is not hanging. Why not grab more space in the center and really control that d5 square? So knight to c6 and d4. Now we have captures, and g6, preparing to fianchetto the dark square bishop. Knight to c3 by Magnus, and bishop to g7. So you have to defend your knight. You could even move it, knight to e2, knight to c2, but Magnus defends it with bishop to e3. This is the usual way to do it. Knight to f6, and now usually when you have a situation like this, white will almost always play f3 and go for the standard queen d2, bishop h6, and so on. But here we have h3, a bit of a rarer move than f3. So Magnus probably testing how Jan will fare in this newly formed structure, although I don't think it was much of a surprise to Jan. So castles, and a6 by Jan. Magnus plays a4, stops any b5, and now the position has been reached before, even this year. Magnus had it against Wesley So in the Magnus Carlsen Invitational online, where Wesley played e6, and that game ended in a draw. But here, in this game that was played 10 years ago, rook f to c8 was played, and it is as of move 12 that this position has never occurred again. So let's see how are we to continue this. Well, now if the knight moves, this c4 pawn could be hanging, so Magnus simply strengthens it. We have b3, and only now e6 by Nepo. We have rook to c1. And now, as everything is fully prepared, Nepo executes d5. And here you do something that you almost always do when black tries d5 in a position where maybe d5 can't really be played. First, you eliminate the defender of the e5 square. That's the knight on c6. You capture it, and after black recaptures, doesn't really matter with what width. B captures was played. Now you claim the e5 square. You attack the knight, and the queen is occupying the d7 square, so the knight can't really go to d7. You can't go to h5 because g4 just traps the knight, so you have to go to e8. And this is maybe not the greatest of squares for the knight, but here it will serve its purpose, as you'll see. So f4, of course, we have to defend our e5 pawn, and now comes a5. Nepo says, all right, my knight isn't maybe the most impressive of knights, but I played a5, I blockaded the position on the queen side, and now you have this backwards b3 pawn. You can never push it, and I'm gonna pile up on it with some rooks here along the b file. So knight to e4 by Magnus. Of course, the pawn cannot capture. The queen on d7 would hang, and now you see that this knight is actually serving a fine purpose here. It's not allowing knight to f6 check. Which could be, quite annoying, as maybe black would have to give up the dark square bishop, and then if you give up the dark square bishop, imagine if it's not here, I'm just going to try and hide it somewhere. Look at all of those dark square weaknesses. So instead, bishop to f8, gaining more control over the d6 square. For the moment, you have nothing to worry about on the king side, and rook to f3 now. So now Magnus is preparing something like bishop to f2, then the rook can come to d3, put more pressure along the d file, but also just adding another defender to the b3 pawn, if it will ever be needed. So queen to d8. Now the queen is defended, and d captures on e4 is a threat. So Magnus plays knight to c5. Now says, all right, my knight is looking very nice here. I'm also defending the b3 pawn now many times. And if you ever capture it, well, then your dark square weaknesses will really be showing. So rook c to b8, Nepo is now ready to start his piling up on that b3 pawn. Bishop to f2, introducing another defender, and now knight to c7. So for the moment you don't need the knight here guarding these squares, as the white knight also moved from e4. Queen to e2, and now comes rook to b4. Now preparing maybe rook 8 to b8 to put even more pressure on the b file, but all in all it's just a very nice blockading piece here. So king h2, Magnus improves the position of the king a little bit, and now bishop to e7. Preparing queen to f8 to really make Magnus make his intentions known. We're gonna threaten the knight, so whether he's gonna move the knight or he's gonna have to play c captures on d5 to add another defender to the knight. So here we have rook to c2 by Magnus, probably with the idea of playing g3 afterwards, and then that will make the white king, you know, feel the draft a bit. So maybe this will serve as a nice defender along the second rank. Other than that, I don't really see the idea of rook to c2. Maybe something, you know, in those lines. But instead of rook to c2, white always has this g4 move. So g4 is very, very aggressive, but if it works, it can be you know, it can really do wonders. For example, if queen to f8, going after the knight here, now we can capture to introduce another defender to the knight, and let's say knight captures, now we can push f5, and white is starting the attack, but he does have to open up his king a little bit, and this is a classical game, maybe it's a bit too ambitious, but okay. Rook to c2 by Magnus, and now queen to f8, as planned, going after the knight, knight to d7 now, attacking the queen, and queen to d8. Magnus goes back, and Nepo repeats, queen to f8, saying, all right, are you going to repeat? And Magnus says, nope, we're continuing the game. C captures on d5. Now the knight is defended. Knight captures on d5, and now g3. So this is why probably this rook belonged on c2. Now you have additional support across the second rank, as the pawns are no longer guarding the white king. So queen to c8 now. The c6 pawn is a little bit weak, so we have to, you know, defend it in time. Bishop back to e1, chasing away Nepo's rook. Rook to b6, and now rook to c4. So what do you play here? Well, we have rook 8 to b8, putting more pressure on the b3 pawn, and now queen to d1, adding another defender, and now, only now, bishop captures on c5. Other than this, there's really no good way for black to try and accomplish anything here. So bishop captures on c5, rook captures on c5, and now queen to f8, putting pressure on the rook here. And now, what do you play here? Well, it seems like you could capture the a5 pawn, or you could not capture the a5 pawn. So what should you do here? Well, it's very interesting. If you go after the pawn, then we have something like queen to a3. This is probably what Nepo had in mind, attacking the pawn here. And then if b4, the pawn is now nicely defended, and we open up a discovery to the black queen. The white queen is defending the rook here. Queen a2 or queen to b2 check, for example, check. We're going to play rook to f2 block check, queen a3, and now it doesn't seem like black has sufficient compensation for this. White can even play something like f5, and it's very, very deadly. For example, he captures on f5, queen d4, and there are so many threats here. I mean, the pawn here is just nicely defended by the bishop and by the queen. You can't really start capturing anything. If you play something like knight captures on b4, just e6, and you are in big trouble. The black's position is just falling apart. Even a move like bishop c3 can end in checkmate. Rook can come to a7. The pawn is just a monster here. So it could very easily open up. So here after queen d4, black would really have to really play well to survive a position like this. So I think this was an invitation, but you know, one that Magnus should have gladly accepted. But it seems that Nepo's Jedi mind tricks worked on Magnus, and Magnus just defended his rook. He played queen to c2, and now Nepo immediately put a knight on b4, saying, all right, now you will not be capturing that a5 pawn. So bishop captures on b4, rook captures on b4, and now we have rook captures on a5. So the pawn is now captured, but it's a little bit different, because now we have queen to d8 going after the rook here, rook to c5, and now, well, it's just the matter of explaining why you gave up the a5 pawn now. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find a forced draw for Nepo while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting either of the two moves. Rook captures on b3 is the first one, and it's a pretty straightforward one. And if you went for rook to d4, that just means you are truly an exceptional player, because rook to d4 is also a forced draw, but only if you are a machine. So I guess most of you went for rook to b3, but those who went for rook to d4, you sir are a machine. So congratulations to everyone. Now we're gonna show both of them, but first we go for the more complicated one, because that's what you guys enjoy the most. So after rook to d4, we're obviously threatening rook to d2 check to win the queen. White will block this, and now we're gonna play rook to d1. Asking White, what do you do here? So regardless, we're gonna infiltrate the position with our queen, with some like queen to d4 to keep an eye on the b4 square. But if White, as there's really no way to push this, White can capture the pawn, and then we go into this queen d5, threaten checkmate, rook to g2 blocking, and now even queen to f3, now threatening queen f1 to queen to h1 checkmate, and then White will say, okay, that's not gonna work, I'm just gonna play f5, and after queen to f1, threatening checkmate, now we're gonna play rook c8 check, rook captures, queen captures, and after king g7, even this. So this is why it's sort of a computerish draw. King to h6, we're gonna play queen to f8 with check, king to g5, now h4 check, king f5, g4 check, king captures on e5, queen to c5 check, and even king to e4, and it's looking very, very dangerous here. If something like king to f3 comes, could be extremely dangerous, because the rook can block the queen's checks. So you're gonna have to play something like queen to c4, go into queen trade, captures, and now let's say rook to a1, rook to c2, guarding your passed pawn, and now rook captures on a4. So for example, c5, king d5, c6, we're gonna play rook to a8, and c7, rook to c8, and now you're gonna stop the pawn. We're gonna play king to d6, pick up the pawn, and this is a dead draw. So this is, I'm sure some of you had this in mind, but the more likely outcome is just rook captures on b3. This is what Nepo played, and now there's really nothing better. Magnus has to capture. We have rook captures on b3, queen captures on b3, and now just queen to d2 with check. King h1, queen e1 check, king to g2, and queen to e2 check. And it was in this position on move 40 that Magnus and Nepo agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. Nepo will just repeat king g1, king g2, or king h1, king h2, and then we're just gonna continue checking, because we are down a rook. So this is a truly impressive game, and I'm wondering if Nepo is maybe the only one in the world who could do something like this to Magnus. And in pretty much all of the games where Nepo defeated Magnus, he always pulled off some sort of a Jedi mind trick, and here it was no different here, where he allowed Magnus to go for this, but Magnus just did not spot it. Here after queen to f8, he offered the a5 pawn, but it's very complicated. It's very dangerous. Magnus refused the pawn, and with it his chances of pushing for the win. So Magnus of course became much stronger in 10 years, but so did Nepo. So we'll see what happens in the World Chess Championship match. This is their clash from the 2011 Tal Memorial. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Once again, really hope you guys enjoyed that. I would like to thank Marshall Ferrier, Jean-Francois Bon, Matthias Bollinger, Oliver Nius, and the Hoodie Guy for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else is happening in the chess world. So thank you all, I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And I just forgot, I remembered I forgot to show you the standings. So here are the standings of this tournament. Let's just enjoy that for a second as well. So yeah. There you go, guys. Magnus won it with 5.5. All right, tied with Levon Aronian, but Magnus had the black pieces in 5 games, and Levon only had the black pieces in 4 games. So that was the tiebreaker why Magnus won the tournament. And Nepo here with 5 out of 9, so half a point behind Magnus and Levon, followed by Vasily Ivanchuk and Sergei Karyakin, then Vishwanathan Anand, Peter Svidler, Boris Gelfand, Vladimir Kramnik, and Hikaru Nakamura. That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you soon.